Okay, it looks like we have a good group now. So hello and welcome to our first webinar of 2023, linking HR practices to results with the NOD Employment Tracker. My name is Felicia Nurmsen. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am Managing Director of Employer Services for NOD. I am a white woman with shoulder-length blonde hair, wearing black rimmed glasses today and kind of a blue flowered kind of floral shirt, if you will, to try to bring in some spring. I'm in Massachusetts and we're in single digits today. I also identify as a person with a disability. I am hard of hearing and use hearing aids, as well as I live with mental health disabilities every day. Before we get started, I would like to go through a few important points for everyone. So if you would like to view closed captions for this event and you're not already seeing them appear on screen, please click the live transcript button on your toolbar located at the bottom of the Zoom window. Then select Show Subtitle. You can also view the captions separately in your browser by clicking the link just posted in the chat. As you can already see, we also have an ASL interpreter signing throughout the webinar today, and we want to thank them for being here with us today. If you would like to submit a question, please click the Q&A button on your toolbar, enter your questions into the box, and then we will go ahead and answer those questions, as many as we can. Finally, we will be launching a yes or no poll during our time together, as well as we do have a short survey at the end of the webinar and would love if you would take a moment to complete that survey. It is just a couple of questions, and we use the responses as a way to improve our programming. Today, we are going to be exploring findings and trends derived from over 210 companies that participated in last year's employment tracker. And we'll dig into new analysis by Talmetrics, which for the first time ever, we are able to link practices to outcomes, those talent outcomes. We do have a lot of valuable information to cover. If you would go to the next slide, please. As you can see here, I am really excited to have Nick Iadevaio from LOreal to discuss how LOreal has used the tracker as an important piece of their overall disability inclusion strategy. He will be joining us in just a bit. Next slide, please. So today, as I said, we'll be exploring some of the findings and key insights from the tracker. But our top learning objectives include exploring the most important disability and practices that lead to the strongest results, identifying critical gaps that remain and how you can successfully address them. Definitely learn how LOreal has been successful using the tracker to chart their course and implement a successful disability inclusion strategy. And then plus, we're also going to take a high level look at some of the changes that we made to the 2023 NOD Employment Tracker, which now features an enhanced focus on mental health in the workplace, as well as digital accessibility practices. Next slide, please. So for those of you joining for the first time, I would like to share a bit of background on NOD. As you see here, NOD's strategic approach is based on 3 pillars. Through our innovation programs and the tracker, we have the ability to analyze data collected over the last 10 years through our experience in programs like our Wounded Warrior Career Program, where we demonstrated 2 times the success rate of other transitional programs for our disabled veterans re-entering the workplace, our Bridges to Better Workforce, which was recognized as the most successful model for hiring people with disabilities and is now being utilized by most organizations as the practice and the gold standard for hiring people with disabilities based on employers' needs. We communicate what we know works. by framing the conversation, familiar concepts seen in a new way, such as I just said, really reframing how we hire people with disabilities based on more on what an employer needs rather than so the way that we had done it in the past with various service providers that may ask you if you had someone, if you would be willing to take a chance on someone, et cetera. We have the most successful, also sharing effective practices as far as self-ID is concerned, culture, mental illness in the workplace with our new grant that we are currently working on. And then we are definitely using that information by sharing that through events like this, conferences, et cetera, and then advocating for public policy, as we see here. We actually had the opportunity to meet with the Secretary of Labor, Marty Walsh, Marty, if you're from Massachusetts, like I am, and hear about the strategy that they have for really enforcing Section 503. We have been working with the largest disability organizations in the country on sub-minimum wage for a few years now, and we continue to see improvements with that as well through the work we are doing with public policy. Next slide, please. And then here you see, in addition to the tracker, NOD's groundbreaking research, and in addition to actually our groundbreaking research with some of the world's most recognizable universities, we have a variety of advisory services designed to deliver solutions to support our clients' needs and those disability inclusion needs specifically. Our Leadership Council brings employers together to learn from NOD subject matter experts and each other, like today. This is a Leadership Council member event that we have opened to outside companies because we know how important it is for companies to hear from others that are doing this work and that have been successful, and how they're using this tool as well as maybe other surveys, but specifically the tracker to help with their disability inclusion practice. By changing practices of employers through this, we really do hope that we're building leading practices, and we see those leading practices, thought leadership, and establishing enduring relationships with the corporate world. And our goal is to expand employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities and to create impact on a broader scale. Now, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the employment tracker and how the tracker allows you to link practices to outcomes. We have redesigned our free benchmarking tool with a focus on helping employers increase self-ID rates and improve employment results. Next slide, please. So before we take a look, next slide, please, before we really dig in, I would love to know how many of you that are on the call with us today have completed the tracker in the past, 2022 and or prior. So let's take a minute for this poll, please. And it is yes or no. Oh, and I do see some people actually putting some comments in the chat, which is really nice. Some saying my company have been completing it, but this is my first year. Some are saying when they're in the middle of it now, which we love to hear. And we're going to give it about 15 seconds. Oh, someone, it's their first year in the middle of it, and it's their first year. Oh, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing the information. So Alex, can you go ahead and publish that poll for us so that we can see? Oh, so this is I mean, this is great. So 71% have not completed the tracker before. So this is great. It really does help us to frame the conversation moving forward. And then there are almost that 30% of our companies here that have completed the tracker. So thank you so much. And we certainly hope that we will see you participating this year as well. So thanks everyone for participating. Really appreciate that. So next slide, please. So here's a little bit of background on the NOD Employment Tracker. It is a free and confidential assessment. It is completely confidential. We do not share any of the information that is specific to your company when we are reporting out on things like this. Today, Nick has not, when he does join us, Nick has not been asked to share how they answer specific questions, but more in a broader sense of how they have been able to use this as a tool. As you see here, being able to connect practices to outcomes and measuring the ability to attract, recruit, retain, and promote people with disabilities in the workplace. Also, having the ability to chart year-over-year progress and then demonstrate gains internally, using this as a tool then to gain buy-in for resources to show that you are improving, as well as where there is still more work to be done. You can use the tracker annually to advance your disability and veterans inclusion initiatives. The deadline is March 10th. So while it may seem too soon, it really is enough time to complete the tracker before that deadline. If you do have any questions about that, I do know that we are putting some information in the chat for everyone so that you are able to get in touch with us if you have any questions. Next slide, please. So here are some tracker improvements that we have made, and I have outcome in my mind because over the last 2 years, we have included talent outcome analysis as part, and really as a new category, so that we can understand not only how people are self-IDing, and that is the first really and the most widely reported statistic for companies is a self-ID rate, but also being able to track those other outcomes, job applicants, new hires, the ones that you see here, people with disabilities moving into management roles. Very important because that is how we are looking at our other underrepresented populations within the workplace. We also have a much more increased focus on mental health and a deeper dive on digital accessibility practices. Sorry, I can't get that out today. Next slide, please. On this slide, we see, and many of you who are taking the tracker may know, you are participating in Diversity Inc.'s top 50 lists, and it is a requirement in order for you to participate in Diversity Inc.'s top 50 lists, as well as we award our leading disability employer seal each year. And it is based on your tracker performance. It is one of the most competitive awards in this disability inclusion space. It is awarded to the top 25% of our companies and those with high self-ID rates as well. And completion is required, again, to be eligible for Diversity Inc. Top 50. Next slide, please. Using data to drive disability inclusion. I'm going to go through just a little bit, few key insights from the tracker, and then we're going to bring Nick in. So next slide, please. Measuring what matters. Companies that track those talent outcomes that we just talked about, the talent outcome metrics beyond self-ID, have higher self-ID rates. Someone asked me to talk a little bit about self-ID rates. So a self-ID rate is when a company asks you, either part of as part of their application process, within their EEOC categories. So are in their demographics, right? Are you a person with a disability? Are you a veteran, BIPOC, et cetera, right? We're all asked those questions. And many companies now ask if you are a person with a disability, and then they give you some examples of what a disability is. So that is self-ID, and that is how we're measuring that within the tracker, right? How many of your employees are actually checking the box anonymously? This is not about disclosure. Disclosure is a little bit different where you're having the conversation, and you may be having the conversation either because you're very comfortable with your disability or you do require an accommodation. So we're going to talk a little bit about accommodations too. But measuring what matters, 74% of the participating companies are tracking talent outcome metrics for diversity, those underrepresented communities that we have tracked for a number of years now, as we should be. This is not about not wanting to track those are more traditional categories. It really is about including disability as part of those diversity metrics, because only 43% are tracking those same metrics for people with disabilities. So that's a great disparity. We hope to see that continue year over year as a result of tracking it within the employment tracker and completing the tracker. Companies with senior leaders that are open about their disabilities have self-ID rates that are 2 times greater than all participating companies. This is something that we, I think, have all known, or many of us have thought and had anecdotal evidence for. However, now we are actually able to tie that to those higher self-ID rates based on this analysis. We also see that 28% of participating companies are only tracking self-ID. And those companies have a much lower self-ID rate. It's 1.43% versus the 4.29% you see here. So measuring what matters, it's not going to do, measuring certainly is not the only thing that's going to lead to an increased self-ID rate. However, if you're not measuring it, then you can't manage it. And some would say, even if you're not measuring it, then it really doesn't exist. And I think that's what we see here, is that those companies that are only tracking self-ID rate are not having that same experience and the same success as we see from those other companies. Next slide, please. Practices that correlate directly to increased self-ID rates. Now, I'm not going to go through this entire list with you. You can see here what those practices are. However, I am going to point out 2 practices that we do consider to be more hanging fruit, if you will, that low-hanging fruit. And that is companies that hire candidates with disabilities sourced from disability-specific job boards, as well as you are sourcing students through colleges and universities and community partners. Why is that directly correlated to increased self-ID rates? That is because you are working with partners that are providing candidates that you know have a disability. And that obviously will increase your self-ID rate within the company when you do know. It makes it so that the people that we are recruiting through these channels do feel more comfortable perhaps in self-identifying. Certainly does not mean that they need to disclose their disability, have the conversation, if you will, but that they are self-IDing as a person with a disability in order to work for your company through these channels and through these sources. We're already working with multiple sourcing partners with the challenge that we have to find great people. So why not be using these disability channels as well? And it just makes sense. If we have an established college, university, talent acquisition process, let's include students with disabilities in that as well. Next slide, please. Retention begins at recruitment. What does this mean, right? Companies who are intentionally sourcing talent from disability sourcing channels have more positive outcomes throughout the entire employee life cycle. So that's attract, hire, retain, develop, promote the entire life cycle. And we see here that from a talent sourcing perspective, again, hiring more people with disabilities through targeted sourcing correlates with lower turnover amongst people with disabilities at 54%. In 2022, 60% of companies indicated they hired people with disabilities from these channels, and that is an increase. That's something that we hope to see continue because we do know that it works. Next slide, please. This also goes to retention begins at recruitment. This efficient and accessible accommodation practices are key. So important. We know that providing an interactive accommodation process, both post-offer and post-onboarding, is correlated with less turnover among people with disabilities at 29%. Interactive accommodation process includes the employee, their manager, human resources, and may also include an employee's physician at that point to help to understand what is the most effective accommodation that this person needs in order to be successful in the workplace. In order for people to feel comfortable with actually asking for an accommodation, they need to know that it's possible. They also do need to know that ultimately we are looking at what and how quickly that can happen, and whether or not it is really an interactive process. So you can see here the other reasons. I'm going to move into the next slide, please. I'm just going to give a quick shout out for our Leadership Council members because they continue to outperform all those that complete the tracker year over year. One of the biggest stats here is NOD Leadership Council members, as you see in the box, have an 11% higher self-ID rate than non-members. So really happy to have a shout out for our Leadership Council members. Next slide, please. Areas of greatest year-over-year improvement, you can see that here. Absolutely happy that more are working directly with personnel at colleges who are focused on disability inclusion, and happy that more and more companies we see that are encouraging requests for accommodation throughout the entire life cycle of employment. Next slide, please. Here we see the year-over-year decline, 2021 to 22. When selecting a new workplace technology, do you consider digital accessibility as a requirement? This is something, again, that really is low-hanging fruit. It's something that not only when we're looking for new workplace technology can we ensure that it is accessible, but when we have vendors, ensuring that our vendors have accessible tools and technology for our employees to utilize can be written into our contracts, specifically so that we do know that what we have is accessible. So again, you can see the others here, but it really is all about making sure that you are utilizing those things that are maybe easier for us as large companies. Next slide, please. All right, now, Nick, love to have Nick with us. If you would join us now so that we can have a conversation about how L'Oreal is using the tracker. But first, Nick, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, that would be fantastic.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Felicia. Always good to be with the NOD friends and community. My name is Nick Iadevaio. I am a cisgender white male who identifies with 2 disabilities. I use he, him, his pronouns. And today I'm wearing a blue striped blazer with a black turtleneck. I have a red pocket square, and I have brown rim glasses today with salt and pepper beard shaved closely and salt and pepper hair.
Thank you so much. So again, I just want to thank you for being here. We have had the opportunity to work together on several different things. You have been very gracious with NOD and involving us with many, many things that you have going on within L'Oreal, inviting us to speak. And I know that your relationship manager, Charles, does work closely with you on in several different areas. Yes, so very happy to have you here, Nick. So let's dive right in.
Yeah,
How's that sound?
good. Let's go.
All right. So let's talk about how do you deal with the issue of HR professionals and managers thinking certain kinds of work can't be performed by someone with a disability, and that in turn prevents people in this talent pool from being recruited, hired, or promoted?
It's a great question. Thank you, Felicia. I think when you think about there's a couple of words you used earlier in your intros and your slides about the chart and the journey, right? So, when I think about this company and the work that we've been doing for a very long time in L'Oreal, we are on a journey. And what you're talking about along the journey is understanding lived experiences and education and creating awareness. I shared myself. I identify with two disabilities, one that I acquired at birth and one that I acquired as life went on, a hearing loss, and then a diagnosis of anxiety and depression. And how many times during the course of my life I've been told I can't, or you won't be able to, by coaches, by parents, by teachers, and even into professional life, and the only way to really combating this is to create education and awareness around people's lived experiences. Our biases is a sum total of all of our lived experiences and the way in which we've been programmed to look at the world in our own little bubbles. I think that it's the opportunity really is to change our perspectives is by continuing on the journey of learning and awareness and education. We talk about people with disabilities. We all know on this call that it is the largest dimension of diversity, with over 33 million working age Americans identifying as having at least one disability. And as I said, a significant number of Americans acquire disabilities as life goes on and things happen, accidents, health challenges, work-related injuries. We need to continue to normalize this conversation about disabilities and break the stigma of people talking about it, sharing our stories and appreciating those of us who have disabilities as, in fact, being maybe differently able. The bottom line, as with any bias or dimension of diversity, we need to understand and confront the bias that exists, and we need leadership and a willingness and an intention to confront it when it happens and do it with grace. And I think that's part and parcel to the work that we do with all of our partners in L'Oreal is it's a collaborative effort, and it is a journey, and it's really based in foundation of intention and education and awareness.
I just want to thank you so much for that, Nick, because that continues to be a challenge for so many companies. And we see that year over year in the tracker results is that while we do know that it is about education, awareness, making sure that we are doing everything to stop the stigma, to eliminate the stigma, it continues to be a challenge for companies. We see, year over year that more and more companies, while they recognize that's important, they're not making the investment in that continuous education of their employees. So thank you for sharing that. Such an important point. And it really does bring us to the next question. And that is based on really, when you think about your tracker results, you take advantage of the debrief every year so that we can talk through what those results are. Why, with so much talk about diversity inclusion, are we still only seeing about 1/3 of those organizations investing in and offering disability awareness or sensitivity training to all managers and supervisors? What do you think might be kind of an influencing factor there?
When I hear you ask this question, think about this for a second. The first Civil Rights Act was in 1964. The Americans with Disabilities Act was not enacted until 1990, 26 years later, if my math is correct.
Yeah.
And obviously we know the journey of marginalized communities and how much that fight has continued on even right up until today. And the people with disabilities community has been fighting for that equitable treatment alongside other marginalized communities all along. But when you think about disability, it's needs to be understood that it is a dimension of diversity. For L'Oreal, disability is a major pillar in our D&I strategy, along with gender, LGBTQIA, socioeconomic, multicultural origins, and age and generations. What it takes is a real commitment to understand that health, wellness, and disability is a part of the conversation when we're talking about being inclusive and creating psychological safety for our employees. I would bet that companies that are struggling with the idea to include disability as a dimension of diversity may not really understand the breadth and depth of the market that exists. When you talk about the disability market and people that are emotionally connected to people with disabilities, you're talking about $1 trillion in the US and $8 trillion globally. So it is in fact the largest dimension of diversity, and it crosses over every other dimension of diversity. So if we take a look at that context and take a step back, I think companies might take a different approach. And I'm proud to say that this company has made it a major part of our D&I strategy for many years. So, but we're on the journey together too, and that's why that tracker is so important to us, because we learn every single year.
That's fantastic. And I just am going to take a moment, I hope you don't mind, to just give a plug and really say bravo to L'Oreal for the newest accessible, right? The lipstick applicator. We can laugh, but that is fantastic. And can you just take a minute to just talk a little bit about the origins of that? Because I think it's fantastic. Go ahead.
Well, we're very proud of it, and I think what really the foundation of that is really that when you create a culture that supports innovation, supports creative thinking and trial and error, it really is founded in inclusion and psychological safety. That's the work that we do, because we know that when we create that culture of inclusion and belonging, diversity, and psychological safety, magic happens. The Hapta device that was recently launched in CES is, we're very proud of it, and it really started as a conversation. We have an innovation competition every year. It's called the Beauty Shaker, and employees from all over the company can submit projects across multiple lines of inclusive beauty or sustainable beauty or innovative beauty topics. And we've seen things come from water safety to electric savings and packaging, and what else have we had? Product development, advertising, promotion. So this was a result of a conversation that happened in our disability think tank about, hey, is there an opportunity for us to create a device for people with disabilities to use our products more easily, especially people that have motor or arm mobility issues or challenges? And what happened was the team created a Beauty Shaker project from that, and then our R&I team took that and then really took that project and started some work around that and built upon that concept, and then the CES device, the Hapta device was launched at CES. So it's at the end of the day, we build upon those moments of inclusion and creating collaboration among the organization, and when you do that, this is the magic that happens, and when we can innovate and ultimately create impact into people's lives. But it starts with creating that culture that really allows people to take risks, allows people to ask difficult questions about things that need to happen or things that need to change, or things that we could do differently to improve people's lives.
That's fantastic. Again, I love that. I love that. It just was the perfect, the perfect point to make when you're talking about the size of the market, right? And that not only from a talent perspective, but overall from a customer perspective, seeing us as clients, customers, and developing those everything that we need, products, programs, whatever that is. And that it came from the Disability Innovation Group is fantastic, ERG Group.
Yeah, and if I may just, I think that's, part of our mission. That is our mission. We want to be the most inclusive beauty company in the world, and our goal is to create that culture where everyone has access and the ability to achieve their goals. And it's not just internally, but it's externally. We see our purpose as, to have to impact the communities that we do business with. And, we know that we don't do that work alone. It encompasses all of our NGO partners, NOD being one of them, our D&I champions, our ERGs, it takes the full ecosystem of within L'Oreal to move the world. And we're very proud of the relationships that we have with our NGOs, because those NGOs give us the insights that we need. They give us the perspectives that we need. We have our think tanks, which are mostly, we usually call ERGs in most companies. And those think tanks give us the dimensions of diversity insights that we need to create things like magic, like HAPTA, or benefits plan augmentations, like a hearing aid benefit that happened as a result of a discussion that happened in the disability think tank. So these are the innovations, and these are the things that we can change people's lives by creating those moments of discussion and insights that we get from the entire ecosystem. So we're very, very proud of all that work.
You just answered really almost two of my questions, I think, within that one, just what you were just talking about, because it does come down to, accessibility, the awareness really permeating the company's culture, and then talking about those steps that L'Oreal has taken to foster such a culture. And a lot of what you just talked about are those steps that you have taken to foster the culture. However, there is one thing that I would love for you to point out, and that is the access that your think tanks have within the organization. I think that's really important, and it's an important tool.
Well, I think I like the word access, because when you're talking about accessibility, it's really the foundation of the work that we all do in D&I, right? Are we providing equitable access for everyone, our employers, our partners, our consumers, our communities, to be able to succeed, thrive, and grow? As the world's leading beauty company, our purpose is to be the company that moves the world, and we need to reflect the diversity of the marketplace. But accessibility, as we all know, is also about enabling people to perform the functions of their job, to get information, to communicate more effectively, to interact, to create. And our efforts to ensure the access and availability to technology, accommodations, information, tools, and processes is hugely a collaborative effort among all of the teams at L'Oreal, whether it's Total Rewards, R&I, HR, DEI, leaders and managers, and TA, and engineering, and safety. I mean, I can go on. There's so many amazing people that are committed to this journey that make it happen every single day. Whether you're in a corporate office, or you're in a warehouse, or you're in a retail store, at a customer site, we want to make sure that we're supporting that culture that supports accessibility. I was actually had the honor this year to be on another Beauty Shaker project. I've been a judge before on these projects. This year, I actually had the chance to be on a team called Tech for All as a part of a Beauty Shaker project. And it was led by our amazing IT team. And this was looking at many of our 36 global e-commerce and consumer-facing sites, and started out as a review of the accessibility of these sites. And now it's looking at the greater conversation of ensuring equitable access for all, and what that means in the experience of it all. So, these projects have a way of starting small and then continuing to grow. But the fact that we create these opportunities for people to make an impact is what's so beautiful about this company, for lack of a better word. And people say, why have I been at L'Oreal for 19 years almost? It's because we are a company that's a learning organization. We want to learn. We want to know what we need to do better, every single day. And that's why the tracker is so important. That's why all of the surveys that we participate in, whether it's Best for Vets or Ceremon or Edge or whatever it is that we're doing, it's to understand what we need to do better. It's to understand what can we need to, what's most relevant to our consumers, to our employees, to our partners. And that's how we're going to be the beauty company that moves the world.
Absolutely. Now, what are the next steps that you plan to take with the tracker to help with disability inclusion efforts?
You know, I mentioned our surveys.
So yeah.
Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I mentioned our surveys, you know, and as always, you know, what we try to do is share the results of our surveys with our think tank members, and really understand that even though we're a top scoring company, we're always looking at new ways to support our people, support people with disabilities, understand people's lived experiences. You know, one point I haven't made yet is, you know, two people can have the same diagnosis of a medical condition and need different support. So there's an assumption sometimes that you, in order to hire people with disabilities, you need the same approach for every, you know, every medical condition or disability. And sometimes you don't, sometimes you can't. You know, my need as a person with a disability, hearing disability, might be very different than yours, Felicia.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And it's only until you take the time to listen to people and understand what they might need that you could support them. And if I'm asking somebody to bring their best selves to work and do their best job that they can possibly do, how can I do that if I don't create the opportunity for them to be their best selves? So that's why understanding and listening and really understanding what people's needs are is so fundamental, which is why the surveys are so important.
Nick, thank you. I couldn't, you know, I was thinking the same thing because we have talked about this before, that we have the same disabilities, right? We both have a hearing impairment. We both have anxiety and depression, and we are two very different people.
We are.
And that we need different things in order to be successful, and that it's so hard for others to identify with that.
Well, and that's an interesting point, you know, and sometimes when I'm facilitating a D&I workshop here, we talk about, you know, understanding what happens in a workplace and what happens outside of work. Like, here's an example. So I can go to dinner with my family, and they obviously all know that I'm hearing disabled, and we'll be at dinner, and it's a loud restaurant, and they're all sitting there having a conversation, and I can't participate because it's too loud. So if this happens with my own family, what happens with workplaces when people are busy getting things done and in meetings and you know, if we're not intentional about being inclusive, this is where people get left out or don't feel included. And then what happens then is they don't want to be a part of that organization anymore, or just they're not bringing their best selves. It isn't that a shame, because that's the talent that we're missing. That's the innovation that we're missing. That's the camaraderie that we're missing when we don't create that culture. So we're really proud of the work that we do through our D&I champions, through our D&I leads, through our leaders, with the D&I lens that they all have now, and really working towards it. It is a journey. You know, we are learning things as we go, and we're very proud of the work that we've done, but there's more work to do for all of us, but we do it together.
There certainly is. And there are just a couple of things that I want to point out as part of this today. And that is that not once has Nick talked about self-ID rates. Not once has he talked about measuring through those metrics. It is about doing the work. And then you see the results and the outcomes.
That's right.
Because you are doing the work. And
creating the culture, right?
Oh, you're talking about it and so eloquently really just puts a really nice bow on the package of what we continue, the message that we as NOD continue to really try and that we continue to promote through the work on the tracker, through all of the other work that we do. The tracker is one tool, though, that comes down to data, right? Data is king. Most companies want it, most companies need it, all companies need it, not just some. But when it comes to disability, it continues to be that struggle as far as what kind of data are you putting into your executive scorecards as it relates to DEI? What kind of access do you have to your C-level, your C-level leaders? Angela Guy is your Chief Diversity Officer, and she's here with us today. I did see her make a comment, and that's fabulous. And we have had the opportunity to have Angela speak at one of our events. So again, it just goes back to making the investments, doing the work, and then you absolutely will continue to see the results. When you're in, you have to be able to measure it regardless, right? You wouldn't know that you're making this progress if you didn't have those tools to measure it. Would you agree with that?
I would, and I'm really proud of my colleague Sonia Sheff, who leads our inclusion plan effort, and behind that is our dashboards, and to your point, how can you improve something if you don't have measurements behind it and knowing what the opportunities are? So our relationship with NOD and all of our NGO partners gives us that data that we need to impact the business and impact the communities that we do business in. So certainly it's, Angela says it all the time, it always starts with data, right? You need to know where you are before you're going to go anyway. And then that includes in supplier diversity and recruiting and in every aspect of our business. And it has to start with data. And that's why these trackers are so important, because they give you a foundation from which to start. And the other point I want to make is it can be very overwhelming when you see the data, right?
Yeah.
Let's not boil the ocean.
Yeah.
Let's start with things that we know that we can impact right away. Can we do a video series on creating awareness where people can speak out about their disability? We have a video series called Break the Silence that we've launched twice already, 2016, actually 3 times, 2016, 2018, and this year, where employees share their stories of having a disability and their lived experiences. And the result of that is that we see the uptick in people self-disclosing. And something like that can really impact people's perception of what it means to disclose and why it's important, and the culture of the organization.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nick. We're in our Q&A now,
Okay.
and we're going to move into that. Do you have any other points that you'd like to make before we take people's questions?
Let's see if I have any. I'm looking at my notes. See, we covered a lot, didn't we? I just would like to say, for those companies that are here, that are doing this for the first time, you're not alone. There's organizations here. There's a corporate leadership council that's here to help. The NOD team has been great partners of mine along the way. And giving us really good insights as to what we should impact and what tools we could use, and connecting us with other organizations. So, these relationships are so important. And what I would say to organizations that are just starting along this journey, don't boil the ocean. Pick a few things that you can really impact. Get some executive sponsorship, which is really important, and put a plan around it. And NOD will help you along the way.
Thank you so much for that, Nick. Now, really, thank you. L'Oreal has been a longstanding partner of NOD's. And again, I will just say we are so grateful for you specifically, the work that you're doing, as well as for everyone at L'Oreal that is just so supportive of this, a fantastic organization. We do have some questions that are coming through here. So I am going to just look through them really quick. And let's see, here's an anonymous. It does say, for organizations that are global, right, how are you measuring self-ID rates, since external to the US, not all countries are collecting disability rates? Is that something that you're challenged with?
It's dependent upon, obviously, local legislation of what you can and can't do. But, the more that you could listen to your employees, the better. You know, even if you're not allowed to collect that kind of data, there's nothing that's going to stop you that would create an opportunity for you to create listening circles or opportunities for you to hear from your employees about what they may need. You know, our total rewards team does a great job of listening to our employees and hearing what they need so that they can augment our benefit plans. And as a result, you know, our plans now include wellness, you know, mental health, you know, support. These are things that the employees have said that they need. And as a result, you know, we've augmented our benefit plans because of it. But you've got to create those moments for people to have those conversations. So there's nothing that stops people from listening, even if you know, they can't disclose.
Absolutely. We have some questions in the chat too, so I'm going back and forth here, Nick. I'm so sorry, but what are the overall pieces to have in place before asking for self-ID or self-disclosure?
Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, what are the overall pieces to have in place before asking for self-ID or self-disclosure?
I think it goes down to a culture of psychological safety and belonging, you know, and building trust. I don't think we could ask people to self-disclose if we don't have that kind of a culture that allows people to feel psychologically safe to do so. And part of that is encouraging them through, you know, like, for example, I said the video series, you know, that show, and we've done mental health panels where groups of employees have gotten together and shared their stories, and people on virtual conferences have heard their stories and asked them questions. So when you feel you're not alone, you know, and it's safe to do so, you'll do that. So that's the work that we've got to do, is to continue to work together, you know, in this country, for that matter, to create psychological safety for people to be their best selves. People will never disclose if they don't feel psychologically safe. So that's the work that we've got to do.
Absolutely. And I do think that we continue to ask. We know that federal contractors are required to ask, right, as part of the application process.
Right.
However, one of the things that we do see, which I think has helped, and I do think that it was kind of a silver lining to some of the changes that occurred as a result of the changes to Section 503 of the Rehabilitation Act, is that we are asking for self-ID. And not only are we asking for self-ID, we're actually giving examples of what disabilities are, because I do think that sometimes there are some of us that may not be, we don't consider ourselves disabled, right? It's just a part of who we are. It's part of our identity. So we wouldn't necessarily choose that we are a person with a disability if we have diabetes. We wouldn't choose that we're a person with a disability if we have a hearing impairment and we have hearing aids, and right? We're not disabled by that necessarily in some of our minds as it relates to disability. So I do think that there's, your point, Nick, there's just still so much more work to be done around that psychological safety and understanding trust and psychological safety before expecting our employees to self-ID and disclose that they do have a disability.
You know, that comment about, diabetes that you just made, that there's a slide in one of my workshops that shows the top 10 disabilities. Yep. And people are always amazed at some of the top 10 First of all, that something like that would be determined to be a disability, right? Mm-hmm. And which of those top 10 fall in there? And they realize that autism is the top and growing disability, along with mental health, right? Neurodiversity. So to your point, it's really about education that we've been talking about this whole conversation. People don't realize how the ADA classifies as a disability, as I said earlier, a major life activity, and that could be over a course of a long period of time or a short period of time, but that is a disability. And absolutely. Or it even could be a perceived disability that from one of these conditions as well, right? So that's why the education is so important, because there's not a lot of understanding around how the ADA defines what a disability is.
It's so true. And, again, so much more around that when we think about perceived, right? So you had a heart attack 5 years ago, but you're back at work, everything's fine, but you are still perceived as someone who could potentially have a disability.
Right,
So you may not be considered for a promotion because you have had this life event, and someone now continues to consider you disabled as a result of that you won't be able
right,
to making those assumptions, right? You
right.
won't be able to handle the stress. We certainly don't want Nick to have another heart attack. We don't Felicia, don't want Felicia to have another stroke, whatever that is. We can still be perceived as having that disability, and that's discriminatory.
That's an important point that people forget, which is why I mentioned it.
Oh no, did you freeze, Nick?
Nope, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead. Oh, I think I am.
Okay,
Hold on.
are you freezing?
No, I'm so sorry. I'm having a little bit of feedback.
Okay,
Okay. That's really unusual. I'm gonna answer this question about talent outcome metrics. We have someone in the Q&A that has asked about reporting talent outcome metrics other than self-ID rates, wanting to know if other companies do that, because things like promotion, presence at different management levels, exits, etc. They have been told that there is too much legal risk to measuring talent outcomes aside from self-ID. And we do see that 38% of the companies this year, last year rather, did measure those additional talent outcomes, as well as 40%, just over 40% in the first year that we started asking for that information. Companies are tracking that. It is, again, completely anonymous. We're not asking for anyone's name as it relates to that. Tracking may be a little bit tricky within your own organization. However, we do know that companies are tracking those additional talent outcome metrics. Would you add anything to that, Nick?
no, it goes back to the point about, you can't improve what you don't measure, we've been very focused on providing our leaders with measurable results that they can take and understand the impact to their businesses, and then what action items can they make happen from that, and but it's not just them, it's their entire ecosystem of the people in their teams that are creating the movement.
Mhm.
And it's not just that leader. The leader obviously drives it, but we want to be able to empower everyone to create change in the organization. And that's why we're really proud of our D&I champions and our leads in the organization throughout the ecosystem of LOreal across the USA to create change. So it's not just top down, it's bottom up. And I saw a question about the ERGs and something about how do we get people involved. And I think one of the best ways is to empower them with the ability to make impact and create programming activations that will resonate with those communities. So to create that culture and that movement in the business that you'd like to see.
Thank you again, Nick. We're going to wrap up here, but I just want to thank you for all of your insights, for again being a part of this with us today to kick off our 2023 webinar series. It really has been such a pleasure having the opportunity to talk with you here. Thank you. And now I'm just going to do a wrap up on some of the things that we would like to just share. I did share earlier that as part of the 2023 tracker, we do have an enhanced questions around disability, mental health in the workplace rather, as well as accessibility. So you should look for that. You have until March 10th to go ahead and complete the tracker. As well as we do have that survey that we would love for you to go ahead and complete before you do leave today. We would I am so sorry, again, I'm having a little bit of a problem. I'm going to take it, just take this out. Sorry, thank you so much. One final thing before we go, please take the survey. It's only a couple of questions, and I hope that you will take time to share your feedback. We also just released our first report analyzing past data from the tracker. You can download the report at nod.org tracker to view key insights and more. Really excited about this report. We did work with Diversity Inc. In order to come out with this white paper, and it does have a lot of really great information for you to share internally as well as externally. So again, I want to thank everyone for being here today, and we will look forward to our next webinar coming up on the Campus to Careers program and what we learned there for students with disabilities or transitioning into employment after graduating from college. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.